pleasure and emotion for me to be here with you all. Such a lovely group of friends. We've had a very interesting weekend with the Persian conference, considering so many aspects of the revelation of the teachings. And it was a terrific exercise for me trying to understand Persian, which I don't understand very much. I get along all right in the kitchen, but apart from that. Friends, success in teaching is what we're talking about, the subject. And actually, that's something that I've been kind of talking about all over the world. I find that people want to know about effective teaching. We've got lots of teaching, but sometimes we're disappointed that we don't have the right response to the teaching. We don't have any growth. In so many areas, the friends say, I don't know, I can't find the people, are not very interested. And I'm going to speak to you now about my understanding of what is the missing element, so to speak. And that is, and I spoke about this also in the conference, that is that we have the plan of the Universal House of Justice, which is the current guidance for us in our collective dimension. That is, as community, what should we be doing? What should the Baha'is be engaged in? And somehow there has been a certain misunderstanding that by that's what we should focus on. That's what we should focus on collectively. But never lose sight of the covenant that each one of us individually has with the cause of God and with Baha'u'llah. And that's the thing we need to remember. If we keep that covenant, then we have the energy and the confirmation to be effective in the collective activities that we have. So we need a balance always in our life between that. And when you think of we embrace Baha'u'llah, if we recognize him as the messenger of God in this day, we undertake to try our best to follow his teachings and his laws. And that becomes a covenant, if you will, a kind of a pact between our hearts, our souls, and that of Baha'u'llah. Now, it's particularly interesting this year, being the 200th anniversary of the birth of Baha'u'llah, to consider briefly the nature of the manifestation of God. Abdu'l-Baha explains that human beings have a physical part and a spiritual part. They have their individual soul and they have a body through which they are able to express their spiritual existence. He also says very clearly that the spirit comes first. But the spirit actually animates, sustains, and develops the human body. The design for the human body is a spiritual design. It becomes manifest in matter, yes, but it's sustained by spiritual powers. That's why prayers have the capacity to heal us, because of the priority of the spirit. In one of the letters of the Guardian, he even says that matter itself is a certain form of spiritual expression. You remember the teachings about, I'm sure, about mineral, the spirit of the mineral, the vegetable, the animal, the human, the spirit of faith, and the divine spirit. These are the levels of universal emanation of the power of God. All those levels. And wherever it appears, and of course it appears and envelops the whole universe, it produces all those different levels. So that's why Baha'u'llah can say that in distant stars there are planets, and on those planets there's creatures. And Abdu'l-Baha, in one of the tablets of Baha'u'llah, and one place of Abdu'l-Baha, he says there's no way to count the number of manifestations of God that are appearing to those creatures. the process of sending messengers of God and educating us is a universal process. We're in a very kind of primitive stage of it. We've had this marvelous revelation of Baha'u'llah, in which he has now lifted the veil on certain things that weren't understood in the past. For instance, one of the things he says in the Book of Certitude, he says, all things live and move and have their being in the manifestation of God. He's not a distant figure that's now passed away. He is an all-encompassing reality. And Abdu'l-Baha says, in the same connection, the same way that the soul sustains and protects and looks after the human body, and is aware without any education, it knows, if your foot hurts, you know. Or if you're getting too hot, you know. Nobody has to educate you in that. These are immediate awarenesses. So he says, likewise, the manifestation of God has within his reality all of us. We're like the cells of his spiritual universal being. And through those cells, he's able to prescribe remedies and teachings that lift the whole body of mankind. And this whole address of the oneness of the first revelation in which all of humanity could be addressed. Because in the past, the continents were separate. People didn't know about the existence of the whole human race. But now we know. Now he's lifted. The earth is one country. Mankind is citizens. A whole new reality of where the human race is and where it's going has been revealed by Baha'u'llah. And he sustains us. And he says that he's closer to us in our jugular vein than the vein on our neck. But it's the mystery of God that he's put us in a world where we have a body and a spirit. The body has all kinds of animal tendencies. It's interested in, sometimes in its strength. It's interested in itself, putting itself forward. The veils that keep us from correctly understanding Baha'u'llah, he mentions over and over. He says they are selfishness, putting yourself first, not sacrificing yourself for the message and the goals that he's given in his plan. And the other thing he said are passions. Animals have passions. They have passions of various emotions that are not positive. They can be warlike. They can fight each other. They have a terrific force of sexuality. Sexuality is there so the human race will go on. But the manifestation of God prescribes in which way these powers can be legitimately used. He educates us into how to behave ourselves, so to speak. But then it depends on us taking hold of that instruction. And that's a challenge because the animal part is still there. And mostly it's telling us, well, everybody has a problem following these laws. And I don't know, I think God will understand this time if I make a mistake or put my foot in it where I shouldn't put it. And we make excuses for ourselves 100 times a day. It's in the correction of those excuses that we will acquire divine confirmation and assistance to serve the plan. So 100 times a day we have a decision to make. We come to something we want to do or not do. Well, okay, if I lie about this, I can probably get my way. No, it's not correct. You have to keep correcting yourself. And it's in that use of that power of the personal will that he's given us. As we strengthen our own personal will, we acquire the dimension, we acquire the hidden powers and blessings that he's given to each of us. He promises we have treasures inside. But those treasures don't come out unless we make a particular effort. Check each evening, he says, do the review. Bring yourself to account. Remember that phrase in the hidden words? Bring yourself to account each day. Think about what happened to the day. Did you make somebody unhappy? Ask forgiveness of God. Ask Baha'u'llah give you strength so that you make those right decisions at the moment when you need to make them, and hold steady. And we're all faced with this challenge. Nobody is perfect. When you find that you haven't done well, you ask for His forgiveness and strength to do better. If you find in your account that you did do well, you did make some good decisions, you did help somebody, you did show some understanding and love during the day, all right, you thank Him that you were able to, if you would reflect and channel that power, which is His power. The Master has said in a tablet that the service of the friends belongs to God, not to them. Why is that? Because of ourselves, we're animals. We're not spiritual beings. It's through His protection, it's through His covenant, it's through His education, it's through His training that we become another kind of creature. And then we have to thank Him for that, because that's where the power comes from. It's a little humiliating, because we like to think that I'm an important person and I do useful things, and aren't I wonderful? But really it's His power, it's His blessing that gives us any chance to do anything. And sometimes you'll be off somewhere in the jungle somewhere, and you'll realize how important it is that He guide you, that He help you. And the jungle now is here in Vancouver. It's where you're fighting all of these animal passions and difficult challenges. Now, friends, we're told by the Master, Baha'u'llah, and then the Master, and particularly the guardian, that this is a very dark time in the history of mankind. When you're born and you're young and you're youthful, you acquire your understanding of life from various sources. Isn't that right? For instance, when you're very young, you're from your siblings, from your parents, you're learning things. And you think with the mind of a child, because there are various stages that He gives us in our growth. Now, we come to a certain stage where we reach puberty. We reach adolescence. You've heard that word, I'm sure. And that's filled with rather terrific changes that take place in us. One thing, the central force of us, we're told this by the psychologists too, we move from belief and dependency and trust in our parents to an independent position where we have to think for ourselves, where we have to make decisions on our own. It's important in a blessing. I remember particularly Isabel Sabri, one of the early counselors at the teaching center. She said that her mother, from the time she was 10, 11 years old, started talking to her about make your own decisions. You have to make your own decisions. You can consult and we can talk about it. But you will make the decision, and then you will be responsible for that decision. And she said, instead of parents, my mother or father, forcing me to do something, I had to think about this. And she made aware that you can decide this way, but it's not going to come out very well. But that's your decision. And we see in our lives how we make mistakes in our decisions. And you know, the prayer book is filled with prayers for forgiveness and for vision. And we need to use those. We need to have this cycle of acting on our own understanding of life. But that understanding of life presently is compromised because of the society around us. Our school is a secular education. This is not what Baha'u'llah asks for. He asks for a combination of material, scientific education and divine education together, so there's balance. And we don't have that yet. But what we do have are the divine teachings. We have the books of God that He's left for us to educate us. And Baha'u'llah says, immerse yourself in the ocean of my teachings. The Word of God, the verses of God, The verses, for instance, if you start with just the hidden words alone, they change, they transform the character of our consciousness. Our consciousness is absorbed all these influences from the movies and from the television and from our peers and from all kinds of other dark things on the internet. How are we going to free ourselves from that? By reading the obligatory prayers, by fasting each year. These are the two pillars of spiritual life, he says. We can gain control of our lives, so to speak, rather than being subjected to the wildness of our lower nature, to the dictates of our bodies. Abdu'l-Baha says in an interesting way. He says that the body is like a horse, and the soul, our spirit, is like the rider on the horse. If you discipline the horse can take you to heights that you couldn't get walking. But if you don't discipline it, the horse will take you where it wants to take you, and it will buck you off into the mud, and you're subjected to it. So we want to be trying to train our horses. And in the words of the Guardian, when he was asked about teaching, he answered in the last year of his life through a number of letters through his secretaries about what it is we need to do to become effective in service. And I want to read a few of those quotations for you. To refresh us about this subject. The first one, he says, success will crown the efforts of the friends on the home front, that's us, when they meditate on the teachings, pray fervently for divine confirmations for their work, study the teachings so they may carry their spirit to the seeker, and then act, and above all, persevere in action. When these steps are followed and the teaching work carried out sacrificially and with devoted enthusiasm, the faith will spread rapidly. The order of these points, these steps that he makes sometimes is altered. You'll see in the other letters. But we have here 1, meditation, 2, prayer, 3, study of the writings, and 4, action. Effective action depends on 3 internal aspects of our lives: prayer, meditation, and study of the writings. Then, when we take action, then when we arise to conform to and obey the instructions of the Baha'i administration and the agencies and work together with the community, we have a charge, if you will. Our batteries are charged, and we can act with energy, and we can act with resilience, and we can also act with forgiveness, that if we aren't treated the way we think we should be treated or something like that, we don't get hurt so easily. We don't allow things to paralyze us so that we don't want to take part, because I don't want to see that guy again, or I don't want to see that girl again, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. All these are the limitations of suggestions coming from our animal side. How can we bring the spiritual to bear on it? Another one, let's see. No, Siri, I don't want to talk to you. She's insisting. I have nothing to say to you. Go away. There she is. Gone. The keynote of success in the teaching field, another letter. The keynote of success, that's all what we're all looking for, right? In the teaching field is study of the word, prayer, meditation, and then action. Above all, perseverance in action. When these steps are followed in the realm of self-sacrifice, success will be achieved. These are promises of the Guardian. What he's saying, he's giving us a plan, a formula, and he's saying this will result in success. The teaching work will go ahead rapidly. Now we need all of us to ask ourselves, are we fulfilling that covenant with Baha'u'llah that requires prayer, meditation, study, and then action? Or are we busy in cycles of growth and using all our time there and not really considering that we have this other inner personal plan, individual plan of action, as well as the collective plan of action? Now, the House of Justice didn't stress the individual plan of action because that's in the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha, and that's what every Baha'i is concerned with. It is added on to our program that has been given in the writings and by the Guardian and so on. It's added on a new culture of action. It's involved us in core activities at the local level, identified them, developed them, and so on. It has given us an institute process for training. Of course, to some degree, it deepens us, but it's not the same as going to the basic writings. We'll talk a little bit about each one of these points here. Let's see. Shoghi Effendi also sent a message to the Hands of the Cause of God about this subject in the last year of his life. The beloved Guardian has stressed over and over again that to effectively, interesting this word keeps coming, effectively teach the faith, the individual must study deeply the divine word, imbibe its life-giving waters, and feast upon its glorious teachings. He should then meditate on the import of the word, and finding its spiritual depths, pray for guidance and assistance. But most important, after prayer, is action. After one has prayed and meditated, one must arise, relying fully on the guidance and confirmation of Baha'u'llah to teach his faith. Perseverance in action is essential, just as wisdom and audacity are necessary for effective teaching. The individual must sacrifice all things to this great goal, and then the victories will be won. This is what God offers us in the Revelation. He sent the manifestation of God. There's no way that Baha'u'llah was going to live 1,000 years so he could teach everybody on every part of the planet. And it's part of the plan of God that he should give as an inheritance his revelation to his followers. Then his followers, according to their own lights and understanding, carry the faith to others. So the light of Baha'u'llah's heart passes to the other hearts of the first disciples and apostles of Baha'u'llah. And then it passes to us, and then it passes to our children, and then it passes to their children. And they have this option to participate, depending on the degree to which they're ready to sacrifice themselves, depending on the degree to which the love of God grabs them to make a difference. Apparently it looks like sacrifice, but in reality it's the greatest gift of God, that you should be able to quicken another soul by telling them about this message that Baha'u'llah has brought. Because that's the transformation, that's the beginning, that's the seed of transformation in human reality. And to participate in that is the most blessed act, the most important thing that one can do. Again, the Guardian is telling us these are the sequence of things that we need to be doing so that we can do that teaching in an effective manner. Another quote, you'll see there's a dozen of these. Teaching is the source of divine confirmation. It's not sufficient to pray diligently for guidance, but this prayer must be followed by meditation as to the best methods of action, and then action itself. Even if the action should not immediately produce results, or perhaps not be entirely correct, that does not make so much difference, because prayers can only be answered through action. And if someone's action is wrong, God can use that method of showing the pathway which is right. If you don't move, God can't steer you. If you don't move, Baha'u'llah can't inspire you with which way to act or what to do. So you're building up through prayer, meditation, and study, then you act. He doesn't say act first. He says these other three first, so that we become sensitive to the inspiration and guidance which is promised in the writings for those that arise to teach and to serve. Now, the basis of prayer, as I understand it, the most important aspect of that is the obligatory prayers. If for some reason you haven't connected and are not regular about using the obligatory prayer, first thing you want to do in your life is to arrange that. Abdu'l-Baha says there's two excuses for missing the prayer. One is that you're too sick to get out of bed, and the other is that you're mentally ill, unable to think properly. So if you miss it, you have to choose one of those two. I don't know if you can manage that or not. So not a very healthy choice. So nobody can tell you to say the obligatory prayer. Nobody is checking. Well, somebody's checking. But why is he saying? Do you think God needs us to pray? He says over and over, he doesn't need us. The prayer is for our benefit, not for his. Even though we're praising him in the prayer, but that's the whole point of our life, is that we should turn towards him, draw close to him, that he might draw close to us, to become our companion in the service of the faith. Some of the prayers ask, you remember, our confidant, our companion. How can we reach this? So we have this obligatory prayer. Then we have the occasional prayers. We have the Tablet of Ahmad. When you get really desperate and you say, well, my life is really getting off course here, or it hasn't gotten on course and it better do something, say the Tablet of Ahmad. Remember that. When Baha'u'llah talks about his religion, the religion of God, he says it's like a heaven. And it has two luminous bodies in it. One is the sun and the other is the moon. And he says the sun is fasting. The sun of religion is fasting. And the moon of religion is prayer. But the name he uses there is salat, obligatory prayer. Those are the two things that hold up our spiritual lives. So we don't want to miss out on those, and we want to ask the friends that know more about it, or our teachers or our tutors or whoever it is, to explain well about the fast that comes around once a year. I was talking to the friends about this last fast. If you look up in the book, the Holy Book of Baha'u'llah about fasting, he says, "O peoples of the world, we have ordained a fast for you." You hear that? He's not saying, "Oh, Baha'is, you better fast." He's saying this is a law enjoined on all humanity. If you have some colleagues at your school or in your office that are curious about the fast, you say, well, you're invited to fast as well. So invite them to join. No, not a few people that have come to the faith through fasting, who hadn't yet embraced the cause, but through fasting they became excited about it then. And then obligatory prayer is the other. Now, in relationship to prayer, and then in relationship to the study of the words of God, he tells us that we should recite the verses, and this was part of that covenant we have with him. Recite the verses of God every morning and evening. So we need to ask ourselves, do we do that? And in Letters of the Guardian, he said that the Baha'is should be constantly returning to the words of God and reading the words of Baha'u'llah every day. And to some new Baha'is, he's saying, you friends, he hopes, will find ample time during the day in your leisure hours. Of course, now our leisure hours are all filled up with dance classes and tennis and physical workouts and I don't know what else. But he says, use your leisure time to study the words of God. Because that fires your imagination and your understanding and your conscience. And your consciousness grows through that interaction with the Word of God. More verses that you read, the more you erase the lying tales, he says, that humanity has taught you through all of the godless materialism that's presently prevailing in the world. We only have one shot at this, friends. We'll soon be gone again. Well, I will faster than you probably. We have to pay attention to this so that we don't miss the opportunities given us. Seize your chance, he says in the hidden words, for it will come to thee no more. There's one chance of this dual nature that we have to choose the right way. And the more we conform to the teachings, the better possibility that's going to result in a full life that we have in the world to come. Everything we have here is originated in the divine world, the spiritual world, and that's the eternal realm. So here we might have some inconveniences, we maybe sacrifice, we maybe have to make efforts, strenuous efforts, but the result is everlasting, and so will be such a reward to us. But we have to keep thinking, why are we here? And you're not going to want to hear this, but this is what I'm going to tell you. I can't find the word fun anywhere in the revelation of Baha'u'llah. And yet humanity is now focused on fun. Let us have fun. Everything has to be fun. It's interesting to bear that in mind. He doesn't want us to be unhappy, but at the same time, just wasting time with something that's fun is not going to make a new world out of it. And we are amongst the few people on the face of the planet that are aware of what the message of God is, what God really wants with humanity. What does our Maker, what's his plan for the planet? What does he want to develop? He wants to bring about the most great justice. He wants to bring about the most great peace. And that leading then to a divine civilization. We don't know, when we have more and more human hearts awakened to this power that's latent within us to reflect the light of the manifestation of God, what kind of a civilization will that produce? What kind of a future will it give us? Meditation. Meditation, the writings, Sharif Effendi tells us there's no fixed program of meditation in the Baha'i writings. The friends should be left free to seek their own level of meditation, what they want to do. That's one letter. Another letter, he says, though there's no plan for meditation, the friends would be wise to meditate on the verses of Baha'u'llah. That is something to see, for instance, when you read the Gone, every paragraph is something to ponder, consider, meditate. In other words, we don't just read and move on. We read and we ask ourselves, what does that sentence say? Why has he bothered himself to reveal that? What's the implication? What am I missing? I'm not seeing something important here. If I'm not, why? And we look at it and we ask questions. And the more we engage in that process, the more the writings will reveal themselves to us. And the things he wants to speak to us. Somebody said to me, how can I ever know what the will of God is? I want to know what the will of God is, but I don't know what the will of God is. What do the writings say? It said the will of God is expressed in the revelation. If you read the writings, if you study the writings, you'll gradually become well aware of what the will of God is. It may not tell you whether you should buy the property next door or something like that, or if you should attend this or that university. But if you have a solid base based on the writings, then those decisions will become easier, become more obvious, I think you'll find. Meditation. So meditate on the divine writings. Study of the writings, very important, related both to prayer and to meditation. There's a compilation the House of Justice made on deepening in the writings of the faith in the 80s, and it was republished in the 90s, and it's still available. It's in compilation of compilations, or online you can find it just by the deepening compilation that the House of Justice prepared. It has wonderful passages about the importance of weighing the writing, reading the writings, weighing the writings, engaging in understanding the writings. And Shokhi Effendi says that we should all, as Baha'is, become familiar with certain basic works that are necessary for us to be able to become effective teachers again. And he particularly mentions, but it's way back in the 30s, he mentions the Kitab-i-Ghan, the Book of Certitude, we should study very carefully, some answered questions. And he said the Dawnbreakers, especially taken a year to translate the Dawnbreakers, prepare it for us, so that we might capture the spirit of those early heroes of the faith. But if we don't read it, if we don't study it, if it becomes a book on our bookcase and nothing else, it's not going to do the job. In these different letters where he emphasizes the study of the writings, for myself I made a list of what I could understand, the order of things. He says, read the writings. Okay? Then he says, read and reread the writings. It doesn't happen that you finish that book and you go on to another book. That's not those kind of books. They're different kind of books. Shoghi Effendi said, no one can do the Igan. You have to keep going back to it. Then, after that, he says you should assimilate the teachings. You should make a careful effort to absorb the teachings. Another word he uses is that you must digest the contents of these holy books. Digest. You know what that means. You have to fill your tummy and you have to work at it, the digestion. So you think, well, it must be done. I'm digesting. No, he goes on in other letters, he says, master the contents of some answered questions and the Igan so that you can deliver answers on these points to the listeners in a pure form. The deepening in the faith is so that you can present and give the teachings in their true style, in the way they have been revealed. It's nice to trust in the Holy Spirit, and indeed we're not supposed to stop until we get that mastery. That's not possible. But at the same time, to the degree that we're prepared, we will more effectively channel that confirmation of the Holy Spirit that touches the hearts. Finally, he adds one more. He says, if you didn't think that digest and master was enough, he says, then you should memorize characteristic passages from the writings so that you can repeat them when you're talking about the faith. Because those are the words that most effectively touch the hearts of your listeners. It gives us all the trade secrets, so to speak, all the information we need to do this the right way. Then maybe you've heard in the process of what we're talking about here, the words perseverance and also sacrifice. Those are the two elements related to the fourth step, which is action. We're supposed to move ourselves. The Guardian, when in the World Crusade, when the first believers arose from North America, from US, United States, and from Canada to go out to all these virgin territories, he said that the friends must persevere. They mustn't turn around and come back. That they're going out to virgin territories. He said, we don't want to see those territories lapse into virginity again, you know. You've gone out and opened them and started the growth of the faith there. Stick with it. Persevere. The Hand of the Cause, William Sears heard this, and he'd been all over Africa, and he had a cartoon drawn, which I'd seen and which the Guardian saw also. And this is a picture of a small desert island, just 15 feet across, with one palm tree in the middle of it. And a Baha'i couple is standing in the water with rags on, and they found a bottle and they pulled the bottle out. It has a message in it, and with great interest, they pulled the message out of the bottle and unfolded it, and it says, "Persevere, Shogi." They said the Guardian had to laugh about it too, but this was certainly right to the point, you know. Sacrifice. They asked the Guardian about sacrifice. In one letter, he elaborates on sacrifice. He says sacrifice is basically in three areas of our lives. And listen to this, quite interesting guidance that he gives. The first one, he says, is financial in character. That we need to learn to sacrifice whatever we don't need, or even what we do need, sacrifice it for the growth of the cause, for the finance of the cause. That is the source of wealth, of individual wealth and growth, spiritual growth for the individual. So the sacrifice of our money. The second part, he said, the sacrifice, this is more difficult, is to sacrifice our time for the cause. Because our time is our own, we like to use it for what we want. We have obligations in our work or in our studies we can't avoid. But then the Baha'i community is calling us, the house is calling us, use your time to do this, participate in this, do this, go to the assembly meeting, go to the feast, go to the holy days, all kinds of sacrifice. And sacrifice to use your time to meet people to teach the faith as well. Time, that's the second one. The third one, he said, is even more difficult. As I recall, he says that the third one is sacrifice of your person. What's that mean? You have an idea about how you want your life to go, where you want to achieve your achievements, what you want to do in the way of study, all kinds of programs and plans you make in your head. Some of that needs to be sacrificed in order to be able to have the time, in order to be able to have the funds to sacrifice financially. So these are the three challenging areas. If we want to serve the cause, we need to sacrifice in those ways. Perseverance is, of course, not turning back, not giving up, moving forward. Now, how closely related these three, prayer, meditation, and study, are to being able to sacrifice and persevere in the service of the teaching? That's the questions we need to ask. I think they're very closely related, you know. You want to run a marathon, you have to prepare yourself. There's certain prerequisites, and then you're able to run and you're able to sustain yourself in that run. All of this is very closely related, to the subject of spirituality. And Chogi Fendi warns us, he said, the materialism in the air, we have to be very careful that we don't absorb it into our lives. It's so easy for us to put all our material goals ahead of our spiritual goals. How do we make that balance? How do we focus, raise our focus to the spiritual? He wrote a letter, and as it turns out, it was a letter written to a young woman, a Baha'i who was out serving as a pioneer. I know the lady myself. And he says in this letter, it's a little lengthy, but I think you'll find it very interesting. I want to read it for you. How to attain spirituality is indeed a question to which every young man and woman must sooner or later try to find a satisfactory answer. It is precisely because no such satisfactory answer has been given or found that the modern youth finds itself bewildered and is being consequently carried away by the materialistic forces that are so powerfully undermining the foundation of man's moral and spiritual life. Because spirituality is missing. That's the measure of, if you will, of utility and success and merit in this life. Indeed, the chief reason for the evils now rampant in society is the lack of spirituality. How many times we ask ourselves, or we hear other people ask, what's the matter with the world? What is it? Here, the sign of God, Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the faith, is saying chief reason is lack of spirituality. The materialistic civilization of our age has so much absorbed the energy and interest of mankind that people in general do no longer feel the necessity of raising themselves above the forces and conditions of their daily material existence. It seems like life is complete without obligatory prayer, without meditation, without study of the writings. I've got a full program. I'm busy all the time. That is the influence of the materialistic suggestions coming to us from a society that's godless, that's given up religion, that doesn't understand spirituality. There is not sufficient demand for things that we call spiritual to differentiate them from the needs and requirements of our physical existence. The universal crisis affecting mankind is therefore essentially spiritual in its causes. The spirit of the age, taken on the whole, is irreligious. Man's outlook on life is too crude and materialistic to enable him to elevate himself into the higher realms of the spirit. It's this condition, so sadly morbid, into which society has fallen, that religion seeks to improve and transform. For the core of religious faith is that mystic feeling which unites man with God. This state of spiritual communion can be brought about and maintained by means of meditation and prayer. And this is the reason why Baha'u'llah has so much stressed the importance of worship. It's not sufficient for a believer merely to accept and observe the teachings. He should, in addition, cultivate the sense of spirituality, which he can acquire chiefly by means of prayer. The Baha'i faith, like all other divine religions, is thus fundamentally mystic in character. Its chief goal is the development of the individual and society through the acquisition of spiritual virtues and powers. It's the soul of man which has first to be fed. And this spiritual nourishment, prayer, can best provide. Laws and institutions, as viewed by Baha'u'llah, can become really effective only when our inner spiritual life has been perfected and transformed. Otherwise, and this is a frightening sentence, otherwise religion will degenerate into a mere organization and becomes a dead thing. And this has happened to so much of the religion of the past. We've seen that. The believers, he says, particularly the young ones, should therefore fully realize the necessity of praying. For prayer is absolutely indispensable to their inner spiritual development. And this, as already stated, is the very foundation and purpose of the religion of God. One more quotation, friend, from the Guardian that I think is very apposite to this situation. He says, he writes himself in his own hand, not by the force of numbers, not by the mere exposition of a set of new and noble principles, not by any organized campaign of teaching, no matter how worldwide and elaborate in its character, Not even by the staunchness of our faith or the exaltation of our enthusiasm can we ultimately hope to vindicate in the eyes of a critical and skeptical age the supreme claim of the Abha revelation. One thing, and only one thing, will unfailingly and alone secure the undoubted triumph of this sacred cause, namely, the extent to which our own inner life and private character mirror forth in their manifold aspects the splendor of those eternal principles proclaimed by Baha'u'llah. All of it's depending on this transformation and change, which is depending on these three. Effective teaching is also the means to effective transformation. It's the secret. Seems to me this is being said over and over again. The great thing is to live the life, to have our lives so saturated with the divine teachings and the Baha'i spirit that people cannot fail to see a joy, a power, a love, a purity, a radiance, an efficiency in our character and work that will distinguish us from worldly-minded people and make people wonder what is the secret of this new life in us. We must become entirely selfless and devoted to God so that every day and every moment we seek to do only what God would have us to do, and in the way He would have us to do it. If we do this sincerely, then we shall have perfect unity and harmony with each other. Where there is want of harmony, there is lack of true Baha'i spirit. Unless we can show this transformation in our lives, this new power, this mutual love and harmony, then the Baha'i teachings are but a name to us. What a challenge it is. So, occasions like this, I think if it raises in our minds the questions again, am I doing enough? Am I doing what I should be doing? What can I do that will change the course of my life? It can be very valuable. And the reason bringing all of these points up is how do we be successful in the teaching work is connected to this. It all comes back to our hearts and our own relationship to our Maker and to the manifestation of God in this day, who's calling us, offering us the opportunity. What are we doing about it? What will we do about it? And how will that affect the destiny of our nations where we live? One fully active Baha'i, Abdul Baha'i, said in a nation provides a protection for the whole nation. He said, we don't want so much numbers of lukewarm believers. We want inflamed believers. Look at the power of these early heroes and heroines of the faith. How effective they were because they had drawn close. They stay in communion. Abdul-Baha in the Divine Plan, and the House of Justice is developing the latest stages in the unfoldment of the Divine Plan through the 5-year plans that they've been giving us. Abdul-Baha, on the one hand, he said he wants the Baha'is to become incarnate spirit, incarnate light, shine from head to foot. A lot of prayer, I think, friends, to get us thinking in that way. But surely he doesn't call us to such a task if it's impossible. That wouldn't be just or fair. It must be within our reach. Now the House of Justice says this plan requires a Herculean effort. Hercules was, very powerful God in the past, and he made great efforts. So we're asked to make these great efforts. And Abdul-Baha, he calls on us. He says something extraordinary. He says, now you have made efforts, you have strived, And he said, now I want you to increase your efforts 1,000-fold. Now, friends, I know most of you, some of your tongues are hanging out. You're tired with all the activities and what you're trying to do. How can I increase that 1,000 times? But then Abdu'l-Baha, in the course of the divine plan, gives prayers. And those prayers say that the moth can become an eagle, and the atom can become a sun, and a drop can become an ocean, if we implore and ask the assistance of God and Baha'u'llah for our activities. And in that sense, you all have the potential to increase everything 1,000-fold. So let's see what we can do. And you can leave your mark on this generation. You can leave your mark on this 5-year plan if you choose that course. If you reach for it. If you grasp it. And I wish you every success in that. Thank you very much.
Faith will grow until a point when all the hearts of mankind will rejoice?
Oh, that's a very good question. When all of us pray, meditate, study, and act, I think that's the best hope we have.
I have a quick question. With all of the focus that's being put on home front pioneering and focusing on the local communities and decentralization as a whole and how it's sort of coming together, I'm thinking that there's going to be a lot more focus on doing years of service where I live. But I was wondering what your opinion would be on traveling and teaching instead of teaching locally. What would the difference be? What would the need be?
Well, I think for that you need to look to see what the guidance of the institutions is and wherever you're living and what the goals are, the national goals here in Canada or in neighboring countries. Certainly there's still the need for international pioneering, but it's not the main emphasis at the moment. With the institute process and with learning these core activities, wherever you go in the world now, you can fit in with the Baha'i activities where you go, because that's what's being taught and that's how the people are acting in the collective plan. I hope that you will encourage this individual plan of transformation that we talked about here tonight also in your travels, because people want to help, but they don't always know. And as I say from the beginning, I hear Baha'is saying, I'm just so discouraged, nobody's interested. Usually that's because we're not interested in the spiritual aspect of it, because that's the thing that touches the hearts of the people. The connection that we have, that mystic connection that Shoghi mentions with Baha'u'llah. He sent a book among the books that Shoghi has given us in English. One of them, you'll recall, is Prayers and Meditations by Baha'u'llah. And in 1938, I think it was, to the American National Convention, Shoghi Effendi said that he had sent the manuscript of this book. It would be published shortly. And he hoped that through that book, more than any other, the Baha'is would draw nigh unto Baha'u'llah, that he might draw nigh unto them. Now that, for those of you that are dealing with the writings also in Persian, the volume that's called Munajat is a mirror image of the English. We've collected all of the Persian passages, or in fact most all of them are Arabic prayers, are in that book. Well, why would that be the book that would draw us nigh unto Baha'u'llah more than any other. And I think it's because of his own lamentations, his own meditations, his own recounting of the things he's suffering and suffered in order to bring the message to us. It has a special way of quickening us. So if you haven't turned to that book or studied that book or meditated on it, I'd urge you to try to get hold of it.
You mentioned that perseverance is one of the qualities that is needed for success in teaching. And I think something that I personally struggle with is how to remain hopeful and stay atop of kind of the suffering that we see young people going through because of the force of these destructive social forces. So how do we persevere, especially when it's when you're in the heart of teaching in the neighborhood, and on a weekly basis you're visiting and Ruhi books fall apart, junior youth groups fall apart. How do you remain hopeful that the effect of Baha'i faith is taking place?
I hope that the talk that I gave actually touches on those points, because that's exactly, we get into a routine of busyness if we forget the underlying spiritual motivations, if we don't attend to our prayers before and for those activities, they tend to weaken and come apart. Shoghi Penny said there's many dark forces in the world. The dark forces, Baha'u'llah himself says, are generated by attitudes, improper attitudes of human beings, improper actions of human beings. What in the old days used to be called sins. Nobody likes to hear that word anymore, but it's certainly a very important concept. Those satanic forces create anger and upset and criticism and eventually war and all kinds of strife and terrorism. The whole thing is connected to those negative forces, what he calls dark forces. They are inherent in human nature. Human nature is not good by nature. It's good by training from the manifestation of God. Otherwise, it's full of all kinds of shortcomings. Look at the humanity. Look at the problems with it. So we want to not lose touch with what Baha'u'llah, the advice he gives us. Because that's what the prophets of God come for. They come to educate and train our souls in such a way that we can defend ourselves against this lower nature that we've got. And if your activities seem to be slackening or don't have the right spirit, apply prayer. Or get the whole group to pray if you can. And that gradually, the use of prayer on a regular basis, I think, increases trust. Because you need to also trust that somehow this is going to, sooner or later. But one thing and one thing alone, I read that quotation, is the degree to which our own inner nature mirrors forth the light of Baha'u'llah. Oh, Baha'u'llah, help me to become an example of your teachings. Oh, Baha'u'llah, you can use your own words to ask him as well. Although I think we're better using the creating me a pure heart and the different prayers that we have to transform our nature. Don't lose hope. If you lose hope, then you don't pray. And if you don't pray, nothing goes forward. So it's all connected together.
Thank you. I think, again, the issue of time, unfortunately. I wish we didn't have that limitation. Thank you again for this very special afternoon. And thank you for being here, asking questions, and hopefully we have been inspired to arise, which is, I'm sure, what is the most precious thing that Mr. Dunbar would ask from us and would love to see happen. With this in mind, dear friends, we conclude this very special afternoon. I have just a few announcements to make. First of all, yesterday and the day before, Mr. Dunbar had given a magnificent, in fact, a talk in 2 parts called The Living Book. We have the tapes, the DVDs actually, outside, or you can put an order. It is they are very special DVDs, and you can, even if you were not at the conference, you can basically order them outside. And then it is a very practical announcement which takes us from that high level of spirituality to a very sort of necessity of life. Someone has lost the driving license. And the name is Hamid Ramazani Karim from North Vancouver. Your driving license is at the concession. Please go and get it. Dear friends, safe trip back home. Thank you again, our beloved Mr. Dunbar.